Japan's ready to welcome tourists, including from Singapore, as part of a trial that starts this month. Changi Airport's Terminal 5 project is back on track after a 2-year break due to the pandemic. And with global financial markets in turmoil, should you be worried about a recession? It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story with me, Haryanto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. Small groups of tourists, including from Singapore, will be allowed into Japan from this month. Now, this as a part of a trial. Now, before you get excited about booking a holiday right away, here are a few things you need to know. Only travellers from Singapore, the United States, Australia and Thailand who have received 3 vaccination doses will be able to enter the country. Visitors must purchase their own medical insurance, take part in packaged tours with predetermined itineraries approved by the government, and be accompanied by a tour guide throughout their trip. I know many Singaporeans are eager to visit Japan, so let's find out more about today's announcement from our Japan correspondent, Walter Sim. Why is Singapore on the list, Walter, and what does Japan hope to achieve with this trial?
Well, I think Singapore is on the list because of its relatively stable COVID-19 situation. And as for why Singapore is on the list, even setting aside this COVID-19 trial, Singapore is one of a number of countries from where travelers who are triple vaccinated and who test negative on arrival can actually forego quarantine measures. So I think there's a natural progression for Singapore to be, as part of this tourism trial, where before Japan reopens even further to welcome international tourists from all over the world, because there's this sense of assurance that travelers from Singapore can be considered lower risk. And on top of that, Japan also recognizes that Singapore is a very important tourism market, especially for bilateral tourism. We see a lot of Singaporeans very interested in the Japanese market and vice versa. But I think it's important to have a note of caution behind this optimism over the measure, that we must note the time frame that individual tourists are still not allowed for the time being, that those involved in the small scale trial must be part of tour packages and be accompanied by tour guides throughout. And from what I've read in local media reports, the Yomiuri Shimbun also just reported that the trial is expected to involve just 50 travelers from all 4 countries, the US, Thailand, Australia, as well as Singapore, through 10 to 15 tour groups this month. But that said, if the trial goes well, I think we can expect a further easing of border restrictions.
And Walter, with COVID-19 numbers stabilizing in Japan, is the government under pressure to reopen borders?
Well, yes and no. Looking at media surveys, the sentiment has only just recently tipped in favor towards the further easing of border measures to allow more foreigners to enter the country. So throughout this whole COVID-19 pandemic, Japan has imposed one of the world's strictest border control measures thus far, and this move has actually been largely applauded domestically by the public. And Prime Minister Fumio Kishida would no doubt be aware that his 2 predecessors were done in by the public's perceived by how the public perceives them to have woefully mismanaged COVID-19, which would also give him reason to err on the side of caution. But that said, however, I think there is growing recognition that the stiff border control measures have severely hurt the domestic tourism industry, and there is growing appetite to welcome more foreigners in the months ahead, which is also why I think Prime Minister Kishida is taking baby steps towards the reopening of borders ahead of what I think will be a broader reopening within this year.
That was Japan correspondent Walter Sim. In a sign of air travel gaining momentum, Singapore will restart work on Changi Airport Terminal 5 after a 2-year pause. Speaking at the inaugural Changi Aviation Summit, Transport Minister S. Iswaran says construction should start in about 2 to 3 years, with T5 operational around the mid-2030s. Given the current and projected recovery in air travel demand, Mr. Iswaran says Singapore is investing in expanding aviation capacity, adding that T5's design will be updated to become more modular and flexible. He also highlighted a comment by the International Air Transport Authority Director General Willie Walsh, who said international air travel is likely to recover to pre-COVID-19 levels by 2023, 1 year earlier than expected. Associate Editor Ven Sreenivasan weighs in on what T5's development will mean for Singapore's aviation sector in the post-pandemic world.
What will Terminal 5 do for Changi? Well, Terminal 5 will enable it to step up to the next level. I mean, we'll have the third runway running. We'll have the fifth terminal, probably the biggest. Though, from what we understand at this point, it'll be built in modular fashion over several years, half a decade at least. And what will it do? It will basically help us cater to the rapid growth in passenger traffic. Just in the 4 months of this year alone, Singapore Changi Airport has seen more passengers, 4.5 to close to 5 million passengers, more than the entire 2021. Air travel has picked up in a big way, right? I mean, we read about revenge travel and I mean, you just speak to the folks at Singapore Airlines, you can't get a ticket to London all the way through July, actually. We expect to see very strong growth in air travel this year. It may moderate through next year. Our average air travel growth in Singapore has been about 3% or so. So essentially, growth will be good if nothing else comes in. I mean, we don't see another new COVID variant or some other unexpected event.
In other news, former Ngee Ann Polytechnic senior lecturer Tan Boon Lee was charged today with making racist remarks about an interracial couple. He faces 1 count of wounding racial feelings and 2 of making comments prejudicial to the maintenance of religious harmony. The incident, which took place last June, was captured on video and went viral online. Tan is also said to have made insensitive remarks about Islam during a lecture in Ngee Ann Poly in 2017. He's out on a $5,000 bail and is set to return to court on June 24th. Now, latest from the SEA Games, Singapore's foil fencers retained their women's team title with a win over the Philippines. The gold medal, won by Denise Chan, Cheong Kermay, Chloe Ng and Maxine Wong, is our 4th in the sport at these games. Singapore's men's bowling doubles pairs have claimed a silver and a bronze, the first medals in the event since 2015. Jerry's Goh and Timothy Tham bagged the silver, while Chia Ray Han and Darren Wong came in third. Now a silver as well for Lionel Wong in the men's 10-meter air rifle event. Making his debut at the SEA Games, the 17-year-old said he went into the competition without a medal target, so this was very unexpected. Finally, a singles gold medal remains out of reach for Aloysius Yap, who has to settle for his 2nd consecutive SEA Games bronze medal. The world number 1 losing to Carlo Biado of the Philippines in the semi-finals of the 9-ball pool event. Also in the news, disappointing economic data out today from Singapore. Non-oil domestic exports grew at a slower pace for the 5th straight month in April, rising 6.4% from a year ago, following a 7.7% increase in March. Compare that to the double-digit growth in December and January. Now, analysts polled by Bloomberg expected export growth of 9.2% last month. Meanwhile, in the markets, investors are worried about global economic growth decelerating, with major Wall Street banks warning of a possible recession in the US in the next 12 to 24 months. It comes as the Federal Reserve aims to tame inflation by raising interest rates without causing a recession. But to complicate matters, there's the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and China's COVID-19 lockdowns adding to the uncertain outlook. Joining us is Associate Editor Vikram Khanna. Vikram, when we see what's happening on Wall Street and around the world, stock markets sliding and inflation rising, are investors right to worry that a recession may be around the corner?
Well, there's nothing certain about economics, but I would say that the risks of recession are certainly rising. Well, what's basically happening is that all three of the world's largest economies are slowing down at the same time: the US, the European Union, and China. And the US Federal Reserve is tightening monetary policy into a weakening environment. So if you look at the US, for example, the first quarter growth annualized came in at minus 1.4%. The housing market is under stress because of higher interest rates and higher mortgage rates. There's a negative wealth effect because of the slowdown or the correction in the stock market, which will affect consumption, which is the main driver of the economy. And all the forward-looking indicators are all trending down. In the European Union, the European Commission has just downgraded its forecast for the European Union to 2.7% this year from 4% in February. That's as recent as that. And even that 2.7% is uncertain because the course of the war in Ukraine, etc., are still uncertain. And then in China, you've had a very bad month of April. You've had a contraction of the economy, basically. Retail sales down 11%, industrial production down, and the lockdowns, we don't know when they're going to fully end or whether there'll be new lockdowns. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. So you have all three major economies basically slowing down. And then in Asia itself, around us, we have several countries that have raised their interest rates in the last couple of months: Australia, New Zealand, India, South Korea, Malaysia. Indonesia could do so, and Philippines as well, over the next month or so. So you have higher interest rates in the region, which means slower growth. And even Singapore has tightened monetary policy 3 times since last October. So you put it all together, and you do have a rising risk of recession.
So, Vikram, based on what you've just said, major economies, we are seeing them slowing down. And if they continue to slow down in the months ahead, what will the outlook be for Singapore? What does it mean for Singapore, and what can we do about it?
Well, one of the good things that is happening for Singapore is that the economy has started to open up after COVID. So at least the domestically focused sectors such as construction, travel, retail, and so on, they will do quite well. And I would say that the forecast of 3 to 5% is still achievable. But having said that, I mean, it's true that Singapore will face pressures from rising inflation, as well as the lockdowns in China, which are affecting supply chains, which will affect companies' abilities to expand their exports and so on. To what we should do, I think the first thing, of course, is to continue to keep inflation under control. It was 5.4% in March, which is a 10-year high, and I think the MAS will have to possibly continue tightening through this year, again in October, maybe even before that. Another thing the government can do is to continue to diversify imports, especially of food, so that we have lower food prices. To help the economy, there's limited scope, but what can happen is a ramp up in infrastructure spending, which is already happening. And companies probably should look closely at their supply chains and see if they can diversify and see if they can, replace suppliers who aren't able to deliver. So that's basically all we can do for now. But that said, I would say that 3 to 5% is achievable. But I suspect that if recessionary risks take hold, we will probably come in closer at the lower end of that range.
Vikram, thank you so much for your insights, Associate Editor Vikram Khanna.
Welcome, thank you.
Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.